Your position is no longer available, Mr. Holt. Unfortunately, plans have changed. I remember every single word. The HR director's face on my laptop screen was completely blank, no discomfort, no hesitation. Just a woman reading off a script she had probably delivered a dozen times that month, maybe more. My name is Walter Holt. I'm 54 years old. And 5 days after moving my entire family 1,900 miles across the country, the job I was promised disappeared in a single sentence. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't demand compensation. I just sat there in our half-unpacked rental in Charlotte and listened to Sheila Pruitt tell me that Crestline Systems had undergone restructuring decisions and that the integration team I was hired to lead was being dissolved before it ever existed. She said I'd receive 2 weeks severance as a courtesy. 28 years in healthcare IT. 28 years building systems, leading migrations, solving problems that nobody else in the room could figure out. And it ended with 2 weeks of pay, and a woman who couldn't look me in the eye for more than 3 seconds at a time. I thanked her. I actually thanked her. Then I closed the laptop. I walked outside and sat down on the front steps of a house I didn't own in a city where I didn't know a single person, surrounded by moving boxes that still had Denver tape on them. The street was quiet. It was 10:47 in the morning on a Tuesday. I sat there for a long time. Sandra was at the grocery store trying to figure out where everything was in a town she'd never lived in. Nate, our 17-year-old, was at his new school on his 3rd day, trying to find his way around hallways he didn't know. Cody, 13, was doing the same thing 2 miles away. They had all packed up their lives and followed me here because I had looked each of them in the eye and told them this was worth it. Sandra had walked away from 14 years of teaching at the same elementary school in Denver. She had a department, colleagues who relied on her, a principal who had tried to convince her to stay. She didn't complain once during the entire move, not one word. Nate had given up his spot in a pre-engineering program he'd been building toward for 2 years. He had already been accepted into the track at his old school. He'd said goodbye to every friend he had and gotten into a car and come with us because that's what you do when you're 17 and your dad tells you everything is going to be fine. I was the one who had told them everything was going to be fine. Roy Slade, the recruiter at Crestline who had spent 4 months convincing me this role was built for someone with exactly my background, had sent me 3 enthusiastic emails the week before I signed. He had called it a once-in-a-decade opportunity. The morning after Sheila's call, I checked LinkedIn. Roy had already removed our connection. No message, no call. Nothing. That afternoon, I did the math. Our savings could stretch maybe 3 months if we cut everything that wasn't essential. The housing market in Denver had moved since we sold. What we'd gotten for our house wouldn't get us back into the same neighborhood. Sandra couldn't get her position back. They had already started the hiring process for her replacement. We had security deposits in Charlotte. Nate's old school wouldn't hold his spot. There was no going back. That was the part nobody tells you about decisions like this. When they go wrong in every direction at once. That night, after Nate and Cody had gone to their rooms, Sandra and I sat on the mattress on the floor of our bedroom. The bed frame was still in a box against the wall. She didn't ask me what we were going to do. She didn't say much of anything. We talked a little about the practical things, bills, timelines, who to call first. Then she said she was tired and we turned off the light. Around midnight, I got up to get some water. The kitchen light was still on. Sandra was at the table with her laptop open, her reading glasses on, scrolling through something. I didn't say anything. I just stood there for a moment in the doorway. She was looking at her own resume. She hadn't touched that document in 14 years. I went back to bed. That moment right there was the one that got to me. Not the phone call from Sheila, not the moving boxes, not the LinkedIn notification. It was Sandra at midnight, quietly updating a resume she hadn't needed in over a decade. Not complaining, not falling apart, just doing what needed to be done. I lay there staring at the ceiling for about an hour. Then I got up, went back to the kitchen, opened my own laptop, and started working. The next 3 weeks were the kind of slow that feels loud. I applied to every relevant position in the Charlotte area I could find. A few callbacks came in. Most of them went nowhere fast. One hiring manager told me I was overqualified before the first interview was even over. Another position looked promising until the offer came in at 38% below what Crestline had promised. I thanked them and kept looking. The rejections piled up in my inbox with a kind of quiet consistency that was harder to deal with than outright failure. Went with an internal candidate. Not quite the right fit at this time. We've decided to move in a different direction. Each one was polite, each one was a door closing. Sandra found a part-time substitute teaching position 3 weeks in. It covered groceries and not much else. She took it without making a big deal about it, same way she had handled everything else. She just added it to the list of things that needed doing and did them. Nate got quieter as the weeks went on. He wasn't angry the way some teenagers get, loud and confrontational. He just went still. He'd come home from school, eat dinner, go to his room. When I asked how things were going, he'd say fine and mean something else entirely. I knew what he had given up to come here. He knew I knew. Neither of us said much about it. Cody adjusted faster, the way younger kids sometimes do. He found a couple of friends in the neighborhood within the first 2 weeks. He asked fewer questions. He seemed to understand, in the way 13-year-olds do, that things were complicated and that the adults were working on it. I kept the pressure off my face as much as I could when I was around them. But at night, after the house went quiet, I did the math again and again. Every few days I ran the same numbers and they kept saying the same thing. We had maybe 6 weeks of real runway left before the decisions got a lot harder. Then Lorraine Voss called. She was VP of Strategy at Vantage Health Networks, which was Crestline's biggest regional competitor. She said she'd heard about my situation through someone in the Charlotte healthcare IT community. Word travels fast in a market that size. She told me she had a senior manager position that might be worth discussing. Solid compensation. Good team, not director level, but competitive. I told her I appreciated the call and that I'd think about it. I did think about it for about 36 hours. Then Cliff Baxter called. I was in the kitchen when my phone rang with a Charlotte number I didn't recognize. I answered on the second ring. He introduced himself as CEO of Crestline Systems. His voice had that specific kind of tension that comes from a man who isn't used to making calls like this and knows exactly why he has to. He got to the point quickly. Prime Data, Crestline's flagship contract, a $35 million hospital network migration project, was in serious trouble. The interim integration lead they'd appointed after the restructuring didn't understand the architecture. The client was threatening to pull out entirely. The deadline was 5 weeks out and the project was 7 weeks behind. I knew exactly what he was describing. During my interview process, 4 months earlier, I had flagged a structural problem with their approach to Prime Data. The hospital network used a networked patient data model with branching relational elements, but Crestline's platform had been built around a linear architecture. The two systems didn't speak the same language at the foundational level. I had brought it up with Roy in our third conversation. He told me the technical team was already aware and had it covered. They hadn't covered anything. I listened to Cliff lay out the situation. He didn't minimize it. I gave him credit for that. When he finished, I said I appreciated him reaching out and that I'd be in touch. He offered a consulting rate before I could end the call. Double my original salary, he said. He needed an answer within 48 hours. I said I'd be in touch and I hung up. Then I picked the phone back up and called Lorraine Voss. I told her I wasn't interested in the senior manager position, but I asked if Vantage would be open to working with an independent consultancy rather than bringing me on as an employee. She paused. Then she said she was listening. That night, I stayed at the kitchen table until 2 a.m. By the time I closed the laptop, Apex Integration Group was registered as a business in North Carolina. I had a basic website up, a contract template built from scratch with specific language I had spent 3 hours getting right, and a stack of business cards on order from an overnight print shop downtown. The next morning, I drove to meet Lorraine at a coffee shop near the Vantage offices. Before she could say anything, I slid one of the Apex cards across the table. She picked it up, looked at it, looked at me. Bold, she said. I told her it was either bold or desperate, and I hadn't worked out which yet. She smiled at that. She said the board would want to review a consultancy arrangement, but that she saw real value in the structure, especially given the current instability at Crestline. She said she'd have an answer by end of week. I drove home, pulled into the driveway, and called Cliff Baxter. I told him that Apex Integration Group could assist Crestline with the Prime Data situation. Our rate for crisis intervention work was $375 an hour, with a minimum commitment of 180 hours. I required 50% of the total upfront, non-refundable, before any work began. There was a pause on his end. He said that was significantly more than what they had originally discussed. I said yes, it was. I told him he was welcome to find another solution if mine didn't work for him, but that I would need an answer by end of business the following day. He called back in 4 hours. They accepted 33,750 DR hit our account 2 days later. Sandra saw the notification on her phone first. She stared at it for a few seconds without saying anything. Then she set the phone face down on the counter and went back to making dinner. That was it. No big moment. No celebration. Just a woman who had been holding things together quietly, finally seeing one number move in the right direction. I built the entire Crestline engagement around distance. I worked remotely. I joined their calls, reviewed their architecture, directed their engineers, but I stayed out of that building. I had no interest in walking those hallways. My contract with them had one clause I had written myself and spent considerable time getting exactly right. Section 6.4 stated that Apex Integration Group retained the right to provide services to other clients in the healthcare sector, including competitors, provided that proprietary information from each client remained fully confidential. Crestline's legal team had reviewed the full contract and signed off on it without flagging that language. I had made sure it was airtight before I sent it over. The problem with Prime data was exactly what I had identified 4 months earlier during my interviews. Crestline's platform assumed a linear patient data model. The hospital network's legacy system used a networked architecture with branching relational elements. The two systems were fundamentally incompatible at the integration layer, and nobody on Crestline's current team had caught it because they hadn't done this kind of migration before at this scale. Pete Garner, the interim director they had put in place, was a capable engineer, but he was working from documentation that had missed the core issue entirely. On my first call with their team, I shared my screen and walked them through the revised architecture I had spent the previous weekend building. There was a long silence after I finished. Pete said it would require rebuilding roughly half the integration layer. I said yes, it would. I said it was also the only way to make the migration work within Prime Data's timeline. I kept my tone straightforward, no edge to it, just the facts. While I was working through the Crestline problem, I was meeting regularly with Lorraine at Vantage. The conversations were about industry trends, where healthcare data architecture was moving, what hospital systems were increasingly looking for in integration partners. What made the difference between a migration that worked and one that became a 2-year problem? All of it was knowledge I had built over 28 years. None of it was proprietary to Crestline. But there was something else I knew that Lorraine didn't, at least not yet. During my interview process at Crestline, Roy had walked me through their client portfolio in detail. He was proud of what they had built, and he wanted me to see the full picture before I signed. One of the things he showed me was a sister hospital in the same network as Prime Data, a regional medical center about 40 miles outside Charlotte that was 18 months into its own integration contract with Crestline. The project had been running behind schedule for most of that time. The client relationship was strained. Roy had mentioned it as a challenge they were managing. I mentioned it to Lorraine as a general observation about where opportunities existed in the regional market. I told her nothing about Crestline's internal situation. I described the type of hospital system, the kind of integration problems that tended to develop at that stage of a project, and what a competing firm with the right architecture would need to offer to be taken seriously. Vantage put together a proposal and submitted it to the hospital's procurement committee about 3 weeks later. Hospital procurement moves at its own pace. These things don't happen overnight, but Lorraine told me 2 months after that conversation, right around the time I was finishing the Prime Data work, that Vantage had made the shortlist. Another 6 weeks after that, they won the contract. Crestline had lost their second largest regional client. Nobody announced it publicly in a way that pointed fingers. But in a market the size of Charlotte's healthcare sector, people knew what had happened, and they knew who had been on both sides of it. I delivered the completed Prime Data migration architecture to Crestline 10 days ahead of schedule. The test migration ran cleanly. The Prime Data executives were satisfied enough that they increased their contract value with Crestline by 25%. Cliff Baxter called me personally to say the board was extremely pleased with the outcome. He said they wanted to discuss retaining Apex for ongoing support work. I told him I'd send over a rate sheet. The new rates were 20% higher than the crisis rate. He didn't push back. He just said to send over the paperwork. Around that same time, 2 engineers from Crestline's integration team reached out to me separately. Word had gotten around inside the company about who had actually solved the Prime Data problem. Both of them had been there for years. Both of them had watched the restructuring decisions get made by people who didn't understand the technical side of the work. They asked if Apex had room for people with their background. I told them I'd be in touch within the week. By month 4, Apex had 4 specialists, including those 2. We had contracts with 4 healthcare systems. Sandra had been offered a curriculum director position at a private school in Charlotte, a better title and better pay than anything she'd had in Denver. She accepted it on a Thursday and made dinner that night like it was any other evening. Nate had gotten into the engineering program at NC State. He found out on a Wednesday afternoon and came downstairs and showed me the email without saying much. I told him I was proud of him. He nodded and went back upstairs, but I noticed he started sitting at the kitchen table with me in the evenings sometimes, doing his own work while I did mine. He didn't say anything about it. He didn't have to. Then came the call I had been expecting. It was a Tuesday morning. I was at the kitchen table with my second cup of coffee when Cliff Baxter's number came up on my phone. I answered it the same way I answered every call. Calm, no edge. He didn't waste time with small talk. Walter, he said, his voice tight in a specific way I recognized. It's come to our attention that you've been consulting for Vantage Health Networks concurrently with your work for us. We consider that a significant conflict of interest. I set my coffee cup down. I told him that was correct. I was consulting for Vantage. I told him to pull up the contract his legal team had reviewed and approved. I told him to look at section 6.4. He said the intent of the agreement was clearly not to allow me to work for a direct competitor. I said the intent was spelled out in the language his legal team approved. I said if he believed there had been a breach, he was welcome to terminate the contract and take it to his attorneys. I said the upfront payment was non-refundable either way, as specified in Section 3.2, and that Prime Data's client representatives were scheduled to meet with his board in 17 days. There was a silence that stretched out long enough that I could hear him thinking through his options. Then I said, "Do you want to discuss the contract? Or do you want to discuss the Prime Data deadline?" He didn't answer that directly. He said he expected daily progress reports going forward as specified in the agreement. I told him that had always been the case and that he'd continue to receive them. Then I told him I had a 9 o'clock call to get to and said goodbye. I sat there after I hung up and looked at the wall for a minute. My hands were steady. I hadn't raised my voice once. I hadn't needed to. That was the part nobody tells you about having a well-written contract. The conversation almost runs itself. Cliff did not terminate. He had no real choice and he knew it. I finished the Prime Data work. I submitted the final deliverables 10 days ahead of schedule. The migration ran cleanly on the first full test. No critical errors, no rollback required. The Prime Data executives were satisfied enough to increase their contract value with Crestline by 25%, which was the kind of outcome that makes a board very happy and makes a CEO look like he still has the situation under control. Cliff called after the board meeting to say they were extremely pleased. I said I was glad to hear it and sent him the new rate sheet for ongoing support work. By month 5, the situation at Crestline had continued to deteriorate in ways that had nothing to do with me. 3 of their mid-level clients had begun looking at other options. The regional market was paying attention. 2 of those clients eventually moved their business. The 3rd was still in contract, but everyone in the market knew they were unhappy. The board held a series of internal meetings that I only heard about secondhand. The outcome was that Cliff was asked to step down. He was replaced on an interim basis by a board member named Art Waverly, who I had never spoken to. Waverly called me on a Friday afternoon. He was direct about it. He said the board had reviewed Apex's performance on Prime Data and that they wanted to discuss 2 things. First, retaining Apex for a longer-term strategic role. Second, and this was the part I hadn't anticipated, a formal acquisition of Apex by Crestline. He named a number. It was a serious number. Full valuation of the company plus a 3-year leadership contract at rates considerably higher than what I was currently charging. I told him I appreciated the call and that I would think it over and get back to him within the week. Then I called Lorraine. Vantage's board had separately been discussing a similar idea. Lorraine called me the following Monday with their own acquisition offer. Different structure, slightly different terms, but the same basic idea. They wanted to bring Apex inside. I sat with both offers for 3 days. I ran the numbers. I thought about what the next 5 years would look like either way. I thought about the Tuesday morning 5 months earlier when I had been sitting on those front steps with Denver tape on the boxes, doing math that only went in one direction. Both offers were real. Both would have solved every financial problem we had left, and then some. I called Waverly first. I told him Apex wasn't for sale. I told him I appreciated the offer and the board's confidence, but that I had no interest in returning to a structure where my family's security depended on decisions made by people in a room I wasn't in. He said they could improve the terms. I told him it wasn't about the terms. I called Lorraine the same afternoon and gave her the same answer. She took it better than Waverly had. She said she understood, and that she hoped we'd continue to work together as independent partners. I told her I expected we would. After I hung up with Lorraine, I went and stood at the kitchen window for a while. The neighborhood was quiet in the middle of the afternoon. A few weeks earlier, Cody had made the track team at his school. The coach had called him a natural. Sandra had forwarded me the text from Cody's PE teacher saying he had the best attitude in the class. Small things. The kind of things that don't make headlines but are the actual measure of whether a year is going okay or not. That evening, Nate came downstairs while I was working and sat across from me at the kitchen table with his own laptop. He didn't say anything. He just sat there and worked. After about an hour, he looked up and asked me something about the consulting business, a genuine question about how independent contracting worked and what the margins looked like compared to salaried work. We talked for about 45 minutes. It was the longest conversation we'd had since Denver. A few weeks after those calls, Cliff reached out one more time. Not through Crestline, not as CEO. He asked if I'd meet him for coffee, just the 2 of us, off the record. I said yes. We met at a place near uptown Charlotte on a Wednesday morning. He was already there when I arrived, out of place in a sport coat at a counter-service coffee shop, looking like a man who had recently lost something and was still taking stock of what was left. I ordered, sat down across from him, and waited. He said he wanted to apologize. not on behalf of the company, personally. He said he had known about the restructuring decisions 3 weeks before they were implemented and had not pushed back the way he should have. He said he had been aware that there were people in the pipeline, people who had already made major life commitments based on offers from Crestline, and that he had let the cost-cutting logic override everything else. He said what happened to my family was wrong. That was the word he used. Wrong. I listened to all of it. When he was done, I told him I appreciated him saying it. I meant that. It didn't change the 5 days we'd spent in that rental with unopened boxes, or the midnight I'd found Sandra looking at her resume, or the months of Nate going quiet. But it was something, a man sitting across a table and saying the plain truth about what had happened without trying to dress it up. We finished our coffee talking about the industry, where things were moving, what the next few years might look like for regional healthcare IT. It was a normal conversation between two people who had been on opposite sides of something hard and had both come out the other side still standing. When we got up to leave, he stopped at the door and said one more thing. He told me that Vantage wasn't the only firm that had been watching what Apex was building. He said there were 3 other healthcare systems in the Southeast that had been asking about us. He said he thought we were going to be a real problem for a lot of people who had gotten comfortable. I told him I hoped he was right. About a month after that, I got a text from Roy Slade. Short message. He said he had seen the news about Apex and the new contracts and that he wanted me to know he was sorry for how things had gone. He said he should have fought harder internally when the restructuring decisions came down. He said he thought about it more than I probably knew. I read it twice. Then I set the phone down and didn't reply, not out of bitterness. There just wasn't anything I needed to say. By the end of month 6, Apex had 4 full-time specialists in contracts with 6 healthcare systems across the Carolinas and Virginia. We were in conversations with 2 more. The work was real, the kind of complex migration and integration problems that had been my entire career, except now every decision about how to do the work and who to do it with was mine. One evening I was sitting out on the back deck after dinner. The weather had finally turned and it was the first genuinely comfortable night we'd had since the move. Sandra came out with 2 cups of coffee and sat in the chair next to mine. Nate and Cody were in the backyard, Cody trying to teach Nate something about his track warm-up routine and Nate tolerating it with more patience than I expected from a 17-year-old. Sandra watched them for a while without saying anything. Then she said, "I think this might actually be okay." I told her I thought so too. My phone was on the table next to me. A notification came through from a hospital network in Virginia. Another inquiry about Apex's availability for a major migration project. I looked at it for a second, then turned the phone face down. That could wait until morning. Here's what I know now that I did not know when I was sitting on those front steps with Denver tape still on the boxes. The company that let me go in 5 days handed me something they never intended to give me. They handed me the reason to stop waiting for someone else to put a number on what I was worth. 28 years of experience does not belong to the company that last wrote you a check. It belongs to you. And when they make the mistake of thinking otherwise, the only question left is what you decide to build with it. If a company has ever treated you like you were replaceable, you already know what I mean. And if you're sitting somewhere right now running numbers that only go in one direction, I want you to hear this. The thing they took from you is not gone. It is sitting right there waiting for you to pick it back up. That is not a consolation. That is just how this works. If this story hit close to home, leave a comment below and tell me what happened. And if you have not subscribed yet, do it now. You will want to hear what comes next.